Welcome, everyone. We are very much looking forward to sharing the story of American Express with you today. I am joined by two wonderful women. I'll share a little bit about them. One is Evan English. She's the Vice President of Product Design and Research in Enterprise Digital Membership Experiences at American Express. And Dana Crisfield, who is the Director of UX Research within the same team at American Express. And so I could spend a lot of time talking through all the different places they've worked and basically run through their LinkedIn profiles with you. But I think it'd be more interesting to just tell you that combined they have about 30 years of experience bringing human insights into the design process of various products. And I think it'd be interesting to ask them directly today, what made them so passionate about joining the field of UX? And I'm going to start with Evan.
Sure. So can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure. So my career actually started in product management, digital product management. And one of my favorite things about product management is working across cross-functional teams. And one of my favorite teams to always work with was design and user research. And the thing I loved the most was that design and research was leveraged to solve problems in unique ways, and most importantly, tap into customers directly. And for me, that was just always so rewarding. And when I had the opportunity to do a career pivot and start leading design and research, I think it's never been more relevant and true in my day-to-day, just being able to access customers and hear from them direct and see the results and see the impact, which is something we get to see every day at Amex because we do have that scale. So I think the rewarding aspect of tapping into customers and hearing from them directly is why I love UX.
Great, thank you. And Dana, how about you?
I guess my career spans technology design and research of all sorts. So on the technology side and then on the academic side as well. But I think what's always drawn me to UX is that as users of technology, we've really spent decades kind of shifting the way that we think and work and operate our hands to meet the needs and the requirements of those technology products. And I think UX is really, it encompasses all of the opportunity that we have to make a shift in that and shift technology products, bring them up a level to actually meeting us where we are at. I think that we've got a long way to go, and UX is pretty much the thinking and the work that gets us there.
Beautifully said by both of you. What really brought me to UX is I love the idea of standing up for other people and being a voice for other people. And that's what we get to do day in and day out, every day at Answer Lab. We help companies bring a human-centered design process to every single product that they launch. And I love that our team can be there at the table saying, hey, this is what people really need. Let's steer a decision in this direction so that we can make sure that they're all having a great experience. So with that, I think it would be helpful for everyone on the call today to just have a little grounding in what your team's responsibilities are, Evan, at Amex. What are the goals of your organization sitting in it within the broader American Express company?
So as you said, I lead the design and research team, specifically within our membership digital products group. So we're responsible for the mobile app, the website, amex.com, specifically the logged in state. So once you've logged in and you're using all of our servicing features, as well as our push and personalization channels. So our role in this product space is really twofold. One, we have product designers who are very much embedded with our product teams and work in concert with engineer and product to build products that customers like to use. And then we also have a user research team who is enabling our research program at scale to make sure that we're testing with customers in a rapid and ongoing and compliant way. And our goals, without spending too much time diving into all of our goals, because we support a lot of parts of the business, but ultimately our mission is to make our digital experiences more essential to our customers every day. I think we're very known for customer service at American Express, and we want to be able to articulate that same value through our digital channels And when we think about essential, it's not just servicing. And I think a lot of people think of American Express as a credit card company or a card company, but we're also thinking about how do we tap into adjacent products and services that we have to offer our customers, and how do we bring that to life in our digital channels. And so there's everything from lifestyle products, banking products, insurance, travel, lifestyle. I mentioned lifestyle, but we have all these different pieces to our business, and it's actually a wonderful challenge to think about how you bring those different journeys together in a way that's meaningful for customers. Mm-hmm. The second piece, I would say, though, is that we're also on this mission to build up our practice at MX as it relates to design and research, because it is still a fairly nascent discipline. In a 165-year-old company, design and research in-house has only been around for about 7 to 8 years, give or take. So I think we still are, a growing team, and we're an evolving team. And I think some of what we'll talk about today might bring that to life a little bit more. But that's definitely a big part of our mission, is how do we just build up our practice and get better.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then for Evan or Dana, can you share a little bit more about where does UX research sit in this mission?
Sure. I think as you might expect, we have a lot of ways of learning about our customers, and the research team is really just one of the teams that's generating insights, along with our data science and our analytics teams and our market research teams. And in research, we use the usual variety of methods across the product lifecycle, from early exploratory and generative methods to more evaluative methods that support the process of iterating on designs and features all the way into production. Our most popular method by far among the product and design teams, I think, is the Rapid Usability Lab. And I can talk a bit about how that works if we're ready.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so the Rapid Labs are really usability testing with 6 participants, each engaging with 2 or 3 smaller topics guided by a moderator. So each participant spends about an hour with us, so 20 minutes per topic, and then we debrief together as a team between each of the sessions. And our product and design teams are observing from another room, and it's really an opportunity for them to hear directly from the people using the products that they're designing and building. And to watch them interact with design concepts or respond to any of the new ideas that we have coming up. And the format works well for the usual sorts of things we would include in a usability test, like measuring ease of use or discoverability of design elements, calls to action, copy comprehension, content hierarchy or navigation. And in New York, we do these bi-weekly in partnership with Answer Lab, and that bi-weekly cadence makes it very easy for us to support a lot of teams in a rather agile way.
Thanks, that's a great definition. And I thought it would be helpful to show everyone a quick image, Henry, if you could bring it up, of kind of how to think about the structure of Rapid Labs. We talked about just now, Dana explaining that the bi-weekly cadence, but you can really design a cadence based on what your organization's development and design schedules actually look like. So all Rapid Labs should really be tailored to your organization. You can see one option here is a regimented schedule, which could be following the exact same pattern of the kickoff, the test day, and the debrief findings in the same cadence, either every week or bi-weekly. Some people do it once a month. Then there's sometimes a semi-regimented schedule where you might have 2 in a row and then you skip a week and then you have another one, or a more custom schedule that's just really designed however your team would like. And I thought it would be helpful just to give everybody that sense of, there are lots of ways to structure these. And American Express happens to do the bi-weekly one. So we can take that away, and I thought I'd switch the conversation now to talk about, in the context of this Rapid Lab program, it must be, very important to get stakeholders aligned on what the insights are so they can move forward in the design process. So can you talk about how you do that? How do you get everybody on the same page and making decisions? And maybe start with Evan and then go to Dana and give 2 perspectives.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'll talk about it a bit broadly, and then I'll pass it off to Dana maybe to go into the specifics of our process a little bit. I would say first that in the context of when we say stakeholder, I think the primary stakeholder we're speaking about is our product managers that we work with, because they are the as Dana mentioned, they are leveraging research as one part of their toolkit when it does come to making those decisions. So they're sort of at the helm of, steering the ship, if you will, in terms of how we move forward. And research is quite popular, as Dana mentioned, which is great. We're not in a position where I think we need to sell in the value. People are hooked. I think where we're at right now, which is the harder part, is the how. So it's like, how do we skill up the broader cross-functional team so that they know how to frame the right question? I think that's something that we're still figuring out, like making sure that that question is framed correctly up front helps down the road when we're thinking about the insights that we're gathering and how we're aligning on the outcome of that research. I think also that leads to determining which methods we apply, right? Maybe our Rapid Labs program isn't the right channel for the type of research that they want to do based off that question they're trying to answer. And so there's discussions around the methodologies that we need to apply. And then, how do the findings complement back to the broader tool set? Like, how can we make sure that those insights are actionable and are complementing the other sources of insights that they're gathering? I think that's another area that we're still working on, but I think that helps drive that alignment as well and leads to healthier decisions. But I'll pass it off to Dana. She might be able to go into some of the specifics about how we handle framing the question, our briefing process, things like that.
Sure. I love the way that you sort of put that with we're trying to help our teams to make sure that they're focused on what it is that they want to learn up front. And then we can decide what the methods are that will best get that answered. When we're talking about, once we're really sort of certain that what they would like to learn is a great fit for the Rapid Labs, we generally, in the week kind of leading up to the session, will capture assumptions from our stakeholders across product and design based on really what they think we're going to find, what they think we're going to learn, how they think participants are going to react, or where they think they'll be tripping up in a prototype. Articulating those assumptions up front really helps kind of with two things. First, it gives everyone a chance to sort of surface those things they believe to be the case or the things they think they already know before we begin gathering data. And many of those things that come up don't actually make it to our big list of assumptions that we bring into the labs with us, but there's value in the exercise of articulating them as it kind of frees up space in your head to be able to learn new things. The second purpose is really that it provides structure for the debrief that we do between each session. So after we test with a participant, we debrief on that session. We list the assumptions on the wall, and between each session, the moderator and the teams will talk about kind of what stood out for them and reflect on how those assumptions have fared so far in that session. And by doing that quick synthesis in the room after each session, the team is able to walk away from a day of research with a shared view of where we landed and where some of their prior beliefs and thoughts landed. And the top line insights, Answer Lab usually gets those to us right away the next day, but the teams have actually left the room with a solid idea of where we're heading and what sorts of changes we want to make next.
So you're describing this, and it's a very physical experience. And so let's talk about the pandemic for a minute. We are not all able to get together in person like we used to. How has the pandemic, and especially the fact that everyone is now really relying on digital across their lives, how has that impacted American Express's views on research? Like, big kind of step up to the big picture for a minute. Like, is it more important now, less important? Like, how does it fit into the mix with all the pandemic concerns?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I think it's clearly more important than it ever was before. It was always important, but now we're in a situation where the customer need is evolving. I mentioned we work on the customer-facing digital channels for American Express, and obviously this was happening globally. I should have mentioned we have global remit where we're responsible for 20-something markets. And so, I think there was the demand has always been there. It has increased, but I think there's also shifting priorities happening where we've had to move a little bit faster to catch up with the change in priorities in order to deliver features that our customers needed during a time where they're stressed out. We're thinking, our brand is to have our customers back, and this is the moment to really, be able to demonstrate that in a digital way. So, tapping into customers to make sure that we're moving in the right direction very quickly, because things are happening so fast out there in terms of, their financial health and, the shifts that we had to make with travel and the different aspects of the American Express business, like being able to support them digitally has never been more important. We had to accelerate key servicing features, payments features, things like that. And so being able to keep our user testing program running smoothly was critical. I also think tapping into the other thing and this will probably be a segue into more discussion on this later, but I think the notion of tapping into a broader recruit was really critical at this moment in time, given the spectrum of needs and the global audience. And so I think fortunately that's actually been one of the benefits that's come out of remote user research and remote testing. And I think we'll touch upon that in a bit, but I think that has been key as well. We can't just kind of go to the typical New York-based recruit that we were doing, pre-COVID. We need to broaden our horizons a bit more at scale.
So Dana, when you were describing this experience of putting the assumptions on the wall and using this very physical backroom experience, and when we called you and said in early March, we need to shift this entire experience to be an online one, a remote one, what were your initial reactions? What were the initial reactions of stakeholders? How's everybody thinking then?
Well, it's interesting because the moment we made that switch, that's probably going to turn out to be one of those stories that we tell for a long time, right? The shift, it happened in like 3 very short days. First, as the pandemic was gaining speed, Amex actually made the decision to switch all our interactions with research participants to remote. And the next day, before we could actually even sort of share that story with AnswerLab, AnswerLab came to us and shared the decision to shift all operations and employees to remote. The day after that was our regularly scheduled Rapid Lab. So it worked out to really having like less than 24 hours to adjust. So we focused initially on kind of replicating the in-person experience as much as possible. For participants, our first concern was actually the tech and just making sure that it remained as invisible or close to invisible. We were a little bit concerned about missing out on that in-person vibe that we come to rely on with participants, which is so big a part of the Rapid Labs and the working with our participants. It makes it a lot easier for kind of building a little bit of rapport before you dive into testing. And AnswerLab actually helped us by adding some time before the session to make sure the tech was working, that everything was smooth, and to begin the interaction well and have some sort of easy conversation before we all jumped into looking at software. But our bigger concern was in losing the observation room and the magic that we kind of created for our design and product colleagues when they came in to observe. And I haven't actually been at Amex for that long. When I joined, I was really surprised to discover just how engaged our teams are with research. They show up in the observation room, they pay attention, they come for the entire day, they bring their laptops, and they'll do other work like during portions of the session that don't pertain to them, but they pay close attention to the part that is their work. And there's a lot of conversation in the room that goes on about what they're seeing. And then in between the sessions, the moderator pops back in and together with the observers, we debrief and review the assumptions and have some discussion. And there's some room for all of the different views on what exactly we were just watching. And then during the sessions, there's lots of conversation in the room, not just about what we noticed, but sort of forward-looking about the different ways we might address any problems that we see people having, or anything that's coming up for them as they're talking about the products. And design decisions, they aren't necessarily made in the room, but the germ of them begins to blossom. And I think that kind of engagement among the teams is really valuable. It's both the debrief activity and the conversations that happen in the room during the session get everybody thinking and get us a head start. So we did a lot of hand wringing over how we might replicate that experience online. The first one went off with surprisingly few hiccups, especially considering that we had just a day to plan and put all the logistics in place. But that was in close partnership with Answer Lab and keeping an open mind across our tooling.
That's great. And so I remember you describing, this concern when we've spoken before about with that level of engagement that came from a very physical experience in the back room, would that translate online? And so I'd love to hear you both talk about what was that actual experience then like? If that was critical to getting stakeholders to make decisions and to collaborate together, what did the new experience in the back room look like? And I'll ask Henry to bring up a slide because you've shared some of this with us, and I thought it'd be a nice backdrop to this discussion. And whoever would like to speak first, Evan or Dana.
Oh, sorry, my little Zoom just went down. Okay. Well, the one thing I just want to actually piggyback off of what Dana said, and I think it will speak to some of what you're seeing on this slide, is that I think anytime you disrupt the flow of how you do things, and there's this like change management situation happening, right? And you instantly go into a discomfort zone. And so even though things went off without a hitch, so my biggest concern going into this is, are people going to be comfortable changing the ways that they work? Will collaboration remain high? And I think it's also worth noting that we had a lot of new hires on this team. So Dana mentioned that as well. And so I think the reason I bring that up is because I think having to shift the way you work, there's this like weird organic connection to driving team culture in some ways, because you're sort of in it together, right? Like there was like, and I know that's like an overused phrase right now, but in the context of this problem statement of how do we take research to go fully remote, I think what I noticed was that the teams all felt empowered and motivated, and it really brought them together as a new team to figure out how to do this, right? And so there was this like culture being cultivated as well, like a team culture being cultivated at the same time. And I think that transcended into our broader design and product team as well, because as Dana mentioned, there was always very high engagement with this program, and we do have a really good team culture. And so I think we can go into the hows, and I think Dana can speak to some of the specifics in terms of what that virtual backroom looks like. But it would be, I would feel not right if I didn't mention the fact that I think this team was brand new, and having to rally the troops and kind of define the way this works. It was a good team culture moment as well, which I think helped drive that continued collaboration that you mentioned, Dana and Amy, that we're speaking to as it relates to some of the content on this slide.
Yeah, so Dana, could you share a little bit more about kind of what the backroom experience feels like for the participants?
Oh, sure. The virtual backroom.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So the activities and any of the gatherings that we do kind of leading up to the sessions are really the same. Without a physical room, there is quite a bit more sort of logistical setup that we have to do, getting people access to tools and making sure that everybody knows where they need to go. But after the first one, we kind of retroed with you guys and we iterated a bit. And so the way it ends up working is the participant and the moderator hop on a video call. And then the teams dial into that video conference space to observe. We share the links for each session in the calendar invite, and then we do a debrief in between sessions, also over video. And then to capture the conversation that used to happen in the room, we create a dedicated Slack channel for the observers. And in there, we can share the links and the info for each session and any changes to participants that happen along the way, or any changes to timing. And the real benefit there is kind of having a place for the teams to share what they're observing, to talk that through, to make a note of something funny that happened, or something that they didn't expect, or something they did expect. And we're very excited that is how it turned out. And we also can communicate about what we would like to adjust before the next session. I think leaving some room for making adjustments, even to prototypes or to the way that we're moving through a session, making some room for that was an important thing to keep when we went fully virtual. as a researcher, that's often the last thing that you want to hear is that we're going to be changing the prototype between sessions and you have to shift the way that you're running the session. But the answer lab researchers are often very accommodating about that, and having that space in between the session and sort of capturing it within the Slack channel also helps us to prepare everyone for that. Then we started using an online whiteboard. So like tools like Miro and Freehand are great for this, where we post the list of assumptions that used to live on the wall in the observation room. And we stole a really great idea from one of our researchers in London, and we loaded the designs and prototypes that we're testing onto that online whiteboard. And from there, the teams can add their observations using online stickies in real time during the session. And that kind of ends up being a great artifact at the end of the day that has all of these notes of what happened per participant across the different designs. And it also helps with the debriefs during the sessions. People don't have to take separate notes and remember what they were going to say. It's all up there on the whiteboard. For the debriefs, again, the moderator and the observers gather in a video conference space to talk about kind of what stood out for them or adjustments they want to make for the session and run through those assumptions. One thing about the video calls can sometimes, as everyone knows now, can sometimes create some challenges related to like the individual connections or the tools themselves. And we do a bit of layering of tools for security purposes that can contribute to that. So we continue to iterate on the best solution for each of the different contexts. But video aside, I think between Slack and the whiteboarding tools, we've managed to replicate, and I might argue we've managed to improve upon the in-room interaction. And I can walk through the reasons for that too.
Great. Fantastic to hear that you've improved on it, right? Because sometimes we think that because we've moved from in-person to remote that we've lost something, right? And one of the things I tell people all the time is we have to stop. We're in the middle of a pandemic. The most important thing we can do is protect the safety of our customers. And so asking them to come in person to places is not putting their safety first, right? And so we want to connect with them remotely. And so the question is, what can we gain by using remote methods, not what do we lose? And so I love that your team was able to find so much to gain for all the stakeholders, not just the participants themselves. So we have a slide that shows kind of the full process that Amex goes through with the entire Rapid Lab program, and kind of an infographic, if you want to bring that up, Henry. And would love for either of you to just kind of walk everyone through a big picture view of how, now kind of getting a sense of, there's this Rapid Lab program where there's an iterative cadence to research. And then there's this backroom experience that has some complexity with tools to it. What does that look like all together? And that's what this infographic is. And if you want to take a minute or so just to walk us through it, I think it'd be helpful for everyone. And this is what I always call in a presentation, the money slide, the most helpful slide for everyone. So if anyone wants to take a screen grab of it or a picture, now would be a good time.
Yeah, so we do these every 2 weeks. So in a couple of weeks leading up to a Rapid Lab, we figure out what the topics are and articulate the research questions that we want to answer. And then we do the work to kind of gather the assumptions that you were talking about, right? And make sure that we've surfaced those and that we have the ones that we want to bring in. We load up the tools. So then we get all of the designs and the list of assumptions, any of the prototypes onto the online whiteboard. Create the calendar invites and the Slack channel and make sure everybody's invited and they all know what to do. And then when it comes time for the lab, the Slack channel opens up, everyone jumps in. We also continue sharing those links within the Slack channel. Slack is great because it keeps all of the conversation that happened before you joined, right? So even people who are just jumping in for 1 or 2 sessions, they can actually see all of what happened and any excitement that happened in the previous sessions just by scrolling back up through the channel, which is actually something you can't do in real life. We load up the whiteboard with the whiteboard is loaded up with the designs, and the observers start adding their sticky notes in real time to those designs. And then in between sessions, we do the debrief. again, right after people are kind of leaving with it, with a sense of what our next steps are, the top line findings are released and shared out with everyone on that same day or the next morning. And then a week later, we have a report of all of those findings. We also have some great artifacts, which is the conversation in the channels, and those whiteboards, which have a lot of good information on them.
Great, thank you. And Evan, you know, a question for you before we go into the Q&A from the participants today. You know, looking at this big picture, what are some of the aha moments that came for all of you by switching this process to a remote process from previously being in person? What were some surprises along the way, surprise benefits?
Yeah, I think, well, I mentioned that before. Obviously, I think the research that we did before, it was limited. I mentioned New York. We have a program that's in London too. We try to, you know, get out there and do custom research in different ways, and you know, be mindful that we have a very large customer base that we have to tap into. But sometimes that's cost prohibited. It's tricky, like the coordination involved, having to travel, you know, it doesn't always, it's logistically hard to manage. So I think one of the biggest surprises is how much flexibility and scale we're going to get with this. And, you know, we've advanced our tool set too, that's also helping with that. But I think just being able to, yeah, like I said, tap into a broader recruit. We're learning as we go in terms of how to manage the remote environment, but I think the benefits from a customer standpoint are already coming to life. The other piece to that is that, you know, our customers used to come to the lab, and now they're in their natural home environment. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that has an impact on the insights we get as well, because they're in a more comfortable space, and you know, that is where they're using our services most of the time, either sort of in their homes or you know, they're not in a lab using our services typically. They're in their natural environment. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But already we're seeing the benefits of that too.
Great. Is there anything you'd like to add, Dana?
Yeah. Actually, on the comfort piece, we actually know that a participant's comfort increases their candor in a session. So this is why, and at Answer Lab especially, so much work goes into trying to make sure that people are feeling comfortable when they come into the lab space, right? Make sure they've got a glass of water and that the chair is right. But really, all of that work pales in comparison to being able to sit in your own space, in your own chair, and do the test. So I think our teams have also noticed that at home, our participants tend to be a little less performative, and having greater comfort is creating sort of a more relaxed and honest interaction within our research, and it's actually creating better research for us, we suspect. So we'll be watching this
fantastic.
Go forward. Yeah.
I feel like I want to quote you and put that right on the homepage of our website. That's great. Thank you. Well, now we're going to turn it over to some Q&A, and I'm going to start with one question, and I think I'm going to just answer this first one myself. So what advice would you give to an organization who wants to start building this type of collaboration from the ground up while already remote? And I guess I'd start with the first thing, which is just to help reframe. Sometimes stakeholders have this question of what are we losing by going away from in-person to remote, and to help them reframe that question to what are we gaining? And you've heard all the wonderful things that we're gaining today that you can use in your conversations with stakeholders. The second thing is to align your program design to stakeholders' needs and processes. So doing a lot of external kind of workshops with them and conversations with them to understand how to align. And then you need to build guidelines so that everyone can follow, so that like if you establish a process that's independent of their workflow, you will not have any kind of impact whatsoever. So getting guidelines to be able to support that. And iteration is key. Learning from what's working and what's not to make changes on the fly. And then you heard a lot of different approaches to software usage here. And it's really critical that you pick software that is approved within your organization. While I'm talking, someone's asking what tools do we recommend. We use a lot. Amex uses a lot, from Dscout to Validately to Mural to Miro to Zoom. They really need to fit within the security protocols of your own organization, and with the tech savviness of your stakeholders, right? So you can't overcomplicate something for people if the stakeholders are on a 10, on a scale of 1 to 10 for tech savviness. And then lastly, I'd say the most important thing you can do now that we're remote is focus on security. And if you're using a research partner, that research partner has to have a ton of really, really strong guidelines for keeping your prototypes and your information secure. So be sure that you really think through that and what your processes will be. Okay, another question is, let's see. Are the participants aware of the presence of the back room? So Dana,
what a great question. So in round one, they were, and we agonized in that one day that we had to prepare with our anti-lab researcher over how we were going to speak of that, like how we were going to describe that and make it sort of an easy thing to understand. Everybody's camera was off. Although there were a few last minute Slack channelings of please turn your camera off. But at, as of the next round, we made them all disappear again. So now we can go back to what we used to say, which is there's a room full of people who are observing. They're just here to watch what's going on and to understand a little bit better about how people are using products. They're not going to interact with you, right? So we're sort of back to the usual one, yeah.
And I would build on that to say the software that you use for the study is going to be critical in whether or not you're able to hide that back room or not. So this is a big thing to be thinking about when you're doing your research. Okay, so I'm going to ask this question for Evan. How would you mitigate for designing only for a minority, meaning only those who are available for remote research? Are there concerns here about elite capture because of the internet access or, you know, being technically savvy enough to be able to join a session?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, we partner with you guys on our recruit, right? And so I think you just have to be very upfront in that brief with whoever your research partner is on those requirements. I think we actually have seen a few issues where technology hasn't worked for people. Or they might have a lower bandwidth, or they might not have the most up-to-date technology, and so you just have to kind of work around that. And I think those are challenges that we're going to have to continue to learn from a little bit because it is still early days. I think right now we haven't faced that, but I think again we have to be really crisp up front in that recruit as we're thinking about how to be inclusive. And that's something that we're continuously working on and continuously partnering with Answer Lab on to make sure that we are getting a broad base of users. And again, back to the benefits of being able to do this remotely, I think it is actually making it a bit more inclusive in the sense that we can expand to a broader population than we ever have before. So yeah, that's a great question.
It is. And one of the things that we do to help with that is if we need to have a scale of tech savviness, prior to the session, we spend time with the participants onboarding and making sure they feel ready and confident to be able to participate in the session so that they're not going in cold with the technology straight to you. Let's see. Just going back through these questions. How much time is allotted between the sessions for debriefing? So Dana, maybe you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. So I think in person, we actually used to allot a little bit less. And we found that, that like a 20-minute session doesn't really, when everyone is on video, it doesn't give as much space for everyone to participate. The great thing about video is it actually equalizes the participation of the observers, right? So when you're in the room, you do end up with people who are more prone to talking more, right? People who are just more talkative, and people who are just they might be shy, or they just might not be the sort of person who jumps into the fray of the conversation. And video tends to equalize that beautifully. So everyone gets a chance to talk in the debrief sessions, which is part of what makes them need to take a little bit longer. So they kind of need to be a full half hour of time to get through everything. And if the topics are more complex, we might even need more time than that. I think some feedback that we've gotten from our product and design teams is, could we have a little bit more time in between? So that's, again, a work in progress.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Well, we don't have much time left, so what I'd like to encourage everyone who had a question, if you would like to hear directly from us, Henry's going to be sharing some information next on how you can get in contact with us. I really want to thank Evan and Dana for taking their time today to share their stories with you. So eloquent and helpful. Thank you for sharing your story. I know many people have been nervous about making this switch, and you speak about it so confidently. I think it'll give everybody a lot of encouragement for doing this as well. So thank you both for your time.
Thank you for having us.